Welcome to Investing for the Unpredictable. Today's show, our guest speaker is Brad Blazar. And I'll let Brad take it from here.
All righty. Thank you, Chantel. It's great to be here with y'all. My name is Brad Blazar, two-time author, speaker, and coach, and creator of a coaching program called Capital School, where we basically teach entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs how to attract, how to raise investor capital so they can build, buy, or scale the business, or maybe just fund a special project like a real estate transaction.
Well, Brad, that sounds impressive. I know the audience is going to want to hear more about what you do.
Well, thank you. You know, it largely started many years ago when I was going to school studying architecture. I wanted to be a real estate developer. And while I was in school, Chantel, I got sidetracked. I responded to an ad in a local newspaper and went to work for a small oil company. And what they hired me to do was to essentially get on the phone and reach out to high net worth individuals and basically build trust and establish a relationship. And that largely taught me a skill at a very young age. And I was able to take that skill. And then in my 20s, at the old age of 23, basically dropped out of college and printed up some letterhead and business cards and hired a couple of salespeople and, geologist and landman. And over the course of a decade, built a pretty sizable small oil company. And we were raising millions of dollars a month and had drilling programs going in multiple states, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. And then in the late 1980s, early 1990s, due to the changing tax structure here in the United States and due to collapsing energy prices, I was basically forced to collapse the business. Never had to file for bankruptcy because we never had any debt on the books. But I took some time off and really did a lot of soul searching and tried to find out what I was really good at and gifted at in life. And what I came to largely realize is one of my hard skills, or one of my primary skills, was understanding and largely knowing how to raise investor capital. And so I basically created a career over the last roughly 20, 25 years, aligning myself with business owners, entrepreneurs, real estate companies, and to date have raised a little over $2 billion in capital and trained dozens of other people how to do this as well. And so today, as the creator of a coaching program that now has students all around the world, what we do is we teach business owners, entrepreneurs, and individuals how to attract, how to and how to raise investor capital from high net worth individuals or, really family offices. And it doesn't matter where an individual is on the journey of raising capital. They could be brand new to it, or they could have been doing it a while. We can really help almost anybody just due to our team and the fact that, we largely know how to raise capital and do it right.
Brad, that's very impressive. I'll tell you why. There's a lot of business owners like myself who are looking for ways to improve their businesses and really want to get high net worth clients. Mm-hmm. What I like that you pointed out is that it doesn't matter whether they're new at it or experienced people. That's an important factor.
Yeah, absolutely right. When I talk to individuals that are business owners, many of them, of course, want to be doing better. They want to scale. They want to be more profitable. But one of the big struggles or the big problems is they lack the money. Because they're growing organically. And, I explained to them that really all the money they need exists in the world today. They just need to largely understand how to go out and ask for it, maybe how to put together a private placement memorandum, or better yet, how to use social media like LinkedIn and Facebook to position themselves in front of other people so that they can largely get investor interest. I think the biggest problem that most people have is they go to a bank or they go to the SBA, and it's a very long, lengthy process. And in many cases, of course, people don't qualify. But once you learn the skill of attracting and raising money from investors, really that is almost like the key that unlocks the door to greater success, because it allows you now to grow and scale your business, or it allows you to maybe invest in a large real estate project. And the example I sometimes use, most people are very familiar with the television show Shark Tank. And if you watch Shark Tank, largely what you see coming into the tank to pitch to the sharks are not startups. They're not new people that have an idea that have no track record. For the most part, people on Shark Tank are business owners or entrepreneurs that have had a business for a while, and they just need more money, which is the reason they're there. And so having this skill and really learning how to do this has been a blessing to me, and has largely been a blessing to a lot of the people that we've coached that have come through our programs.
Let me ask you a question here. Now, are there any particular businesses that work well with this program and some that do better than others, or any specific industry that fits in with this type of program?
No, it really works in all applications. At the end of the day, you know, raising capital or raising money from investors is really the same. It doesn't matter whether it's real estate, doesn't matter whether you're doing an e-commerce business, doesn't matter whether you're trying to buy a franchise. It largely is a system that we call the 4-step blueprint. And it's largely understanding that you have to build trust, you have to create a relationship with that other person before they would ever consider investing with you. But understanding a few of these principles and understanding the psychology that lies behind it, that goes through an investor's mind as they're doing due diligence and as they're getting to know you, anybody can be very successful. I will tell you that obviously a large percentage or a large portion of the students that we do coach are in real estate. They could be multifamily investors, or they could be doing things in single family residential. And I think that's just largely because once people get into real estate, they understand that, you know, real estate is a fairly capital intensive business. Doesn't matter whether you're doing a small single family house where you're going in and you're doing some light rehab. You know, eventually you're going to have to pay for things like carpeting and paint and landscaping and maybe appliances. And if you don't have the money, of course, somebody else does. And then once you get into larger properties like small apartment communities, of course, you need access to capital there. And, you know, one of the challenges I think that a lot of real estate entrepreneurs have is frequently they'll go to a traditional lender. They'll go to a hard money lender, or they'll go to a bank and they'll borrow money. And, you know, that's fine. Nothing against that. It's just that when you do that, you're taking on debt. And people that provide financing in that form or fashion obviously have monthly payments. There's obligations that need to be met. And we all know that, you know, life does not throw us guarantees. Things go wrong. Sometimes deals don't turn out the way that we had expected them to. And the problem, of course, when you have debt or you work with the lender, is they can come and take the keys to the asset and ultimately foreclose. What I've largely learned is investors do not have the right to foreclose. And that's why if you look at some of the largest real estate empires that have been built, they've largely been built using OPM, other people's money, or off the backs of investors, because investor capital tends to be a little bit friendlier. You know, and I've largely learned that investors are patient. And as long as you're honest and you communicate, I think it's a safer route to success. But again, you have to learn how to approach investors. You have to learn how to have those conversations, and you have to learn how to come prepared.
For someone that's learning this, what is there any particular expectation they should have in meeting with an investor, as opposed to, you know, when you're meeting with a bank, you have to have your financial statements in order. You have to have a background history of all of your income tax returns, how long you've been in business, your next of kin. They need all that to go to a banker. But now when you're going to an investor, are there some of those things similar, or what would they expect to prepare to have?
It's very different, actually, when you're visiting with a prospective investor. One of the things that we teach is something called the trust sequence. And the trust sequence is something that was written about in a wonderful book by the name of The Trust Economy. It was written by an author named Philippe de Koner. And he basically talks about 6 things that have to take place, one after the other. It's a sequence or a cadence of events that need to take place in order to build trust and establish a relationship with another person. And the thing that's really interesting are the first 3 in that sequence are proactive, meaning it's largely you doing the talking. It's you putting forth the effort. And then the last three are reactive, which means it falls on the investor's part. They're now absorbing, they're now basically taking things in. And really the very first step is what we call perception. It's literally the initial introduction. It's the perception that you make when you meet somebody for the very first time. And it starts with everything from the handshake to the way you're dressed, to what you say, to the quality of your business card, to the quality of the materials that you share with them. And once you get past the perception, which is largely deciding whether there's ever going to be a second date, as I explained, you get to an important part, and that's what we now call temptation. And as a person raising money, you have to try to uncover what the temptation is in that other person. What's going to ultimately cause them to invest? Are they looking for capital appreciation? Are they looking for income? Are they looking for both? Maybe they're concerned about taxes, and so they're looking for investments that largely have a tax benefit component. And you just start asking questions, Chantel, when you invest, what's the time horizon that you typically like most of your investments? Are you more short-term, or are you comfortable with a longer-term investment? And once you uncover that temptation, what we simply find now is that we start building an emotional connection. And the third step in the sequence is what we call connection. It's when you start to notice that prospective investor is checking out your LinkedIn profile, or maybe they're asking to become a friend on Facebook. You notice that they're checking you out on Instagram. Maybe they look at your website. And so what they're doing now emotionally is they're building this sense of a connection. And that leads to the fourth step, which is the most important. And we call that validation. Once you get to validation, which is where that prospective investor now looks at you and says, I can trust you, you have validated yourself in my eyes as someone that is a good steward of capital, or as someone that I can treat as a fiduciary. The fifth step is attachment, and that's where they ultimately invest. They're going to either write you a check or they're going to wire the proceeds. And once they do that, they're now attached to you as an investor. And that now leads to the very last step, which is basically what we call an accommodator. They're now going to basically help you raise money by introducing you to people in their network through referrals. But this is a lengthy process. And the big problem that I see many people make that are trying to raise money is they rush the process, meaning they're starting to talk about the deal, or they're starting to pitch the investor before there's ever any relationship, or before there's ever any trust. And so if that other person doesn't trust you, what are they going to do? They're going to turn and they're going to run in the other direction, which is largely the reason that many people that try to raise money don't do it successfully. They don't understand these principles, and they don't understand some of these things that are very important in the process that have to actually take place.
That's a lot of information you covered here.
Yeah, it really, to learn how to do this properly, of course, takes a little bit of time. It would be impossible to teach somebody how to go out and raise hundreds of thousands or millions in the course of an hour or two. But the great thing that I explain to people is learning how to raise money is something that can be taught. It's like any other skill, whether it's playing the piano or, learning how to ride a bike. It's simply a skill. And once somebody that's done it for a lengthy amount of time, that is very skilled at it, sits down and shows you and explains it, and maybe gives you a script or gives you a blueprint that has proven to work, it just then takes effort and it takes practice. And, we have many people, of course, that we've worked with that today are raising hundreds of thousands, and in some cases, a million or more a month. It's because they now largely understand the process, and they put in place systems that actually now are allowing them to do that.
I want to say something here. There are people that I know are listening to this who are in a startup position of their businesses who haven't been taught this at all. Mm-hmm. And there are some who are already in business who had no clue how to raise money. How can they get in touch with you? Because I think it's so important to know how to reach your school, because I intend to be taking classes myself. I am very impressed, because I'm going to share with you, just listening to what you just said just now, I can see the difference in why some people are able to succeed at what they're doing, and some just up and down, in and out, because they had no specific format or training on how to get there?
Absolutely. It really comes down to understanding that to ultimately have tremendous success in any business, you have to have systems. Systems are what businesses to scale. It's having a system so that when somebody is hired, you can sit down next to them and say, Lisa, this is how we do things. This is a proven system and it is replicatable. And therefore you can teach other people how to do that. And that's how you're able to build and scale an organization. And so it's the same thing about raising money. If I can teach one person how to successfully raise money, and then I can teach another person how to successfully raise money, before you know it, I can have 4 or 5 people all working collectively, calling and networking with investors, and really scale a business where we're raising ultimately, millions of dollars a month. Now, to learn about the program and learn largely about what we do, anybody that is a listener of yours can go to our website. My name is Brad Blazar, and so my website is just www.bradblazar.com. My last name is spelled B-L-A-Z like zebra, A-R, Blazar. And you'll see a little link there up at the very, very top that says Capital School. And that has information, of course, about the program. And you can communicate with us, send us an email. Of course, it has our phone number and other ways to reach out to us as well. And basically what people get access to when they enroll is a community of global entrepreneurs all over the world that are at some point raising capital. Either they're new to it or they're somewhat experienced or they've been doing it for a while. And so you're able to hold other members of the group accountable, but also, of course, network and largely learn from them. And then we have what we call our toolkit. This is basically a virtual online academy where there's a lot of video lessons, a lot of courses and modules, access to scripts, access, of course, to templates so that you can create your own pitch deck or your own offering memorandum and basically come prepared so that now when you're in front of an investor, you're basically prepared. When you go and you pitch to an investor, it's very different than really going to a bank. An investor is really looking to you, and they're largely looking to you to try to decide whether you have a good investment objective or a good business to invest in. They're looking to you as somebody they can trust. And then they're also looking to you and asking, well, what's the team that this person brings to the table? And a lot of people, I think, that want to do bigger things in life never take the first steps and never take action because what they fear is, well, I don't have a track record. I've never done this before. I have no prior performance history to show somebody. And my response and my, answer to that is, my goodness, look at me. I was a 23-year-old college dropout that never had drilled an oil well. And all of a sudden I built a multi-million-dollar oil company and we're raising millions of dollars a month. So it just simply comes down to the confidence that you're able to exude. But more importantly, it's the ability to sit down on that first deal, whatever it is, whether it's a little single family house or whether it's a small apartment or whether it's a new business, and really speak from confidence and say, this is what I plan to do. This is how I plan to do it. And this is the small team of people that I'm working with that are going to help us get there. And once you're able to communicate that and articulate that, you're 90% of the way there, because like I said, understanding that trust sequence and understanding that if you can get that investor to the 4th step, which is validation, where they validate you as somebody they can trust, the rest of it is all now just downhill. It's just really asking for the close and asking for them to invest alongside you.
I'm impressed with that. I'll tell you what really touches me a lot is because I think that this addresses a lot of people, many people who don't have a clue, and they've been going about it the wrong way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Getting the same reaction over and over again and not knowing. And the people they're getting advice from are giving them the wrong advice.
Yes. There's an old saying, and I'm sure you and many of your listeners have heard it, and that is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again with the expectation you're going to get a different result. Well, if you don't know any better and you're continually doing it again the same way, it's never going to change. You're always going to get the same no. You're always going to be shut down. It's largely getting around somebody that's had massive success, raising billions of dollars, that can really dissect what you're doing if you're trying to raise money and pinpoint it almost like a surgeon and say, the place this is falling apart is boom, right there. This is what you're doing wrong, and this is what you either have to stop doing or what we largely need to correct so that you can start having success. Here, let me give you a 4-step blueprint, which is like a script, and it basically explains to you each step on the 4 calls or the meetings or the Zooms, what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to do. And once you do that, it's actually then very simple. It just takes, some practice and some scripting. And I tell people the best way to really do this is to start doing it. It's like exercise. Once you start exercising that muscle and you start seeing some initial success, your confidence level, of course, is going to be increased dramatically. And you're going to finally get to a point where you realize, well, this really isn't as hard as I thought it was. Now that I've actually faced that fear, I've risen to the challenge and I basically have overcome it. And now, of course, I can aspire to become a, quote, professional capital raiser, or somebody at least now knows how to go out and raise that investor capital that I so desperately need to do something big in life. Invest in real estate or invest in a business or buy a company or just do something that is going to allow me greater financial freedom. Because, most people are stuck to a job. Statistics show that 67% of our workforce is disengaged. That means they're showing up for a paycheck, but they don't like what they do, and they already got one foot out the door. Now, if you're an employer or you're a manager and you've got a company of 10 people, how does the knowledge knowing that 7 people that are showing up for work every day are completely disengaged and they're only there because they need a roof over their head and they're looking to get paid, but they've already got one foot out the door? And so what I largely try to explain to people is if you can find some passion in what you do and learn maybe how to attract some investor capital so that you can start something maybe initially as a little side hustle, but then allow that to grow so that maybe that new little side hustle or that business gets to a point where you realize, well, I'm making as much here or maybe more than I am over here at my full-time job. Now I'm in a position where I can walk away and, as they say, fire my boss and really pursue my passions and take that maybe to a whole new level and really build something that I'm proud of or that maybe is more rewarding to me as a career. Because at the end of the day, let's face it, life is too short. And if you're not showing up and you're doing something every day that's engaging, that you're passionate about, you're really not building a life around what I call a fulfillionaire. It's understanding the whole person theory, that there's a lot more to you than just, quote, financial health. There's emotional health. There's, of course, your fitness. There's a spirit and a soul. And really, I believe that, those things kind of have to work in harmony. And that's really where you find passion. And that's really largely where you find much greater success. Because I largely tell people, if you're going to work or you're doing something thinking it's going to make you rich, you'll never get rich. The only way really to become truly financially independent and create wealth is you have to have a purpose. People that find a purpose in life are far more successful because they're doing it for something that drives them every single day. Come rain or shine, they're there for that purpose. And that's largely what I've seen as I've interviewed, some very, very successful people on our podcast, is it all comes down to when they started, they had a purpose, they had a mission.
Let me ask another question here. There are a lot of people that go into sales. Mm-hmm. They go into sales because they want to make a lot of money. It's probably the one field where you are not limited by a paycheck.
Correct.
But a lot of salespeople actually do that so they can learn how to go into a business. How can they learn from this program how to improve their sales and then move on to that to become a business owner?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Chantel. And what you largely have to realize is that raising money is really sales. You're selling yourself, you're selling what it is you're doing or what you're investing in. And there's a lot of psychology. The best closers, the ones really that make the most money in any sales, are the ones that understand largely there is some psychology behind the sales process. And, when I've been the national sales manager for multiple companies, I would explain to people, you do not get paid to sell. What you get paid for is closing. And there's a big difference between being a salesperson and being a closer. And I have an expression that I use to explain people that are salespeople, and it's quit selling the flirt. You're great at flirting all day long, but you're not asking for the order. You're not bringing the process to a closure. And, closure in sales is really taking the buyer's desire for whatever it is you have, products, good or service, and matching that up with what your offer is. But if you never get to a point where you ask, largely, of course, at the end of a conversation, somebody might say something like, well, I got to think about it, or I got to do this. And a salesperson is just going to say, great, that's fine. Let me send you some information. I'll call you back in a couple days. A closer will overcome that objection, or a closer will come back with some type of a scripted response, and boom, they'll close the sale. And so sales naturally, of course, is one of the highest paid careers, but you really have to understand how to close. And the best closers understand psychology. They understand certain closing techniques, like the takeaway close, where you take the opportunity off the table. And typically, psychologically, people now want what they perceive they can't get. So you use that as a tool. And so, largely the answer is yes. People can start in sales and then use these skills to raise capital to then go out and buy or build a business.
Well, you covered a lot. You answered a lot of questions for us. I think, and then it's, you're addressing the broader base of this whole thing, because a lot of people that are listening to this are probably salespeople as well as business owners.
Absolutely.
In insurance sales and real estate sales and other types of sales. And I think that's a key issue, is that they do more selling rather than closing.
Absolutely.
I've been there myself.
And here's the thing that I've largely learned. In the sales process, when you're getting towards the close, you have to create what I call a positive tension. Now, you're not being rude, you're not being inconsiderate, but you have to create what I call a little positive tension where the buyer or the prospect knows and senses it's time for me to make a buying decision. And there's proper ways to do that. As an example, when we're raising money, when you're looking at an offering or an investment, most programs, either you're selling shares or you're selling units, or you have a minimum investment, might be $50,000 or $100,000. There's a psychological way to ask somebody to invest. And rather than just saying, Chantel, would you like to invest with us, which can lead to a yes or no answer, the proper way to do that, and the way I learned and the way that works extremely well, is to always give the prospect an out. Always give them the ability to say no. Because there's a psychological process behind that if you give them the out 9 out of 10 times, they will always opt in.
Wow.
So the way that I do that when I close is I say, Chantel, how much of this program would you like to take today? Would you like 1 unit? Would you like to invest in 2 units? Would you like 3? Or would you like none? And after a pause, they'll usually come back and they'll say something like, tell me again, Brad, how much 2 units in your program cost? And then, of course, that's largely when I just say, go get your checkbook and let's fill out the paperwork, Chantel, welcome aboard. It's a psychological process that you have to largely understand. But once you understand the psychology behind that, when the person really has the desire, they will 9 out of 10 times come back, not with an answer, I need to think about it. They'll say, well, tell me again, how much 3 units in the program cost, or how much 2 units are. And so having done this now for, 20 plus years and really perfecting it, we teach people how to properly ask and properly close investor capital. And it gets back again to the understanding that, very successful people that have created wealth they don't want to be talked up to. In other words, they can sense when somebody really is talking up to them, kind of like begging, please invest, we need the money desperately. And so you really have to talk at their level and be somewhat firm with them in how you deal, basically treating them as an equal. I've met billionaires, people that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's not that they're rude, but they're pretty concise. They're very short in their words, but when they say something, boy, you better listen, because that's kind of the way it is. It's almost like when they say jump, you say how high, but they expect to be talked to the same way. And if you talk to somebody the same way, they'll largely respect you, because what they perceive is a level of success psychologically that is at or close to the same level they're at, and there's a likeness, there's an attraction, because I believe that there is a universal law of attraction where people are attracted to each other when they share similar beliefs or they have similar interests. And so a lot of it really just comes down to this understanding. And people basically that learn these skills can then go on to literally learn how to raise the capital they need to scale their business or to do something else in life. And never, ever let the fear of talking to someone or asking for money hold you back. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons is we're taught as we grow up that asking people for money is a sign of weakness. If you've got to go borrow money, you're communicating to somebody that you're flat ass broke. Well, that's not necessarily true. But if you overcome that, I basically tell people that fear is false evidence appearing real. And you can do one of two things. You can forget everything and run, or you can face everything and rise. And so if you face that and you basically start learning the skill and realizing, of course, that it's a lot easier than you thought, you get access to the capital. And of course, that's now where you rise. You're able to do bigger things. You're maybe able to invest in apartments or in real estate and really change the landscape largely of what your life now looks like.
I want to ask a question too about real estate. I think what happens in real estate is that if you haven't had a lot of exposure, sometimes people start too small. Mm-hmm. I grew up in real estate. My parents owned apartment buildings. They owned courtyard buildings where you'd be 20 units in the courtyard.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I had to learn how to paint and so forth growing up. Yeah. But I think that a lot of times when people think of buying real estate, they start sometimes in the worst communities and too small. Mm-hmm. And is that dealing with fear again when that happens? Because you can't turn, what is it, a silk purse out of a sow's ear, they used to say, but something of that nature.
Yeah, but I think largely it's, they start too small and, they're investing in properties really that aren't going to offer the significant appreciation. I always have been a believer that, you can buy a single family house and then buy a third, or you can go straight to buy a fourplex and have one property where you've got 4 streams of income, 4 checks coming in every month. Well, I would much rather just go to one location and be able to collect 4 checks than have to go to one house and then maybe drive 45 minutes to another property and then drive across town to another. Now, unless you're focused on one area and you build your strategy around that so that, all of the houses you're going to own are within a geographic region, that's largely what I see a lot of real estate investors do. And then it just becomes so problematic. They're getting calls from tenants, hey, the water heater went out, or hey, we got a backed up commode. And, when you have to start meeting people that are caring for your properties, like plumbers or electricians or painters, you literally could spend an entire day just going to 3 properties that you've got scattered across town, especially if you live in a large city like Chicago or, Houston or Dallas. But imagine if you just had a little 12-unit apartment building and every month you're getting 12 checks from 12 people that live in that one building. It's a much easier business model. And it's, of course, a lot less risky because even if 2 of the 12 apartments are not rented, more than likely you're still able to cover your debt service and pay your mortgage and cover expenses and still put some money in your pocket. But when you've got a small little rental house, and that house is vacant, if you still have a mortgage that you have to pay, that's a big burden to a lot of people. And so I feel that for many reasons, multifamily and investing in small properties like that is a much safer route. But I always recommend to people, get some training, read some books, Google some stuff to really learn about this so that you're not making costly mistakes. Because in real estate, mistakes, of course, can be costly. There are plenty of mentors out there, much like myself. I teach, of course, how to raise capital, how to attract investors. I have many friends that are very successful coaches in multifamily or in how to rehab or how to wholesale. And so once you get plugged into my network and we sit down and we kind of have a strategy call and largely determine what it is you want to do, we can then really work with you to build a plan and build a strategy that is almost going to ensure success as long as you put forth the effort and action on your side of the equation and are willing to hold yourself accountable.
One last question before we wrap up here. I always heard about location, location, location. How important is that when you're buying real estate?
It's everything. It is everything. I can't reiterate how important that is. I would rather buy a older property that has deferred maintenance, that needs an investment, has neglected it in a great location, because then I can go in and make a small investment with some paint and basically, as I say, put a little lipstick on it and then sell it because of the locational qualities. Location is everything in real estate. As a matter of fact, I used to work for a company here in Houston that grew to become a multi-billion-dollar company. Their stock was traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And the chairman and founder of that company believed that in every major city, there were certain locations that were far more valuable than any other location in town. And he actually came up with a term that they've trademarked called irreplaceable corners. And what those corners largely were the traffic corners that sat at major intersections, either in front of large malls or large strip centers, knowing that those corners would always have the highest visibility. And so being in commercial real estate and knowing that visibility was key amongst restaurants and things like that, they were able to build a global platform and buy these locations that were in such demand because of the locational qualities. And so when you look at real estate, understand that location is everything. Waterfront property demands a much higher price, of course, than property that's not on a water, even if it's a river or even if it's a pond. And so largely you have to look at these things, proximity to great schools, proximity to things that certain people are going to want to look for at different stages in their life. But really, it all comes down to that location, location, location.
You've covered a lot of material here. I'm an awful lot. I'm really very happy. I think that my audience is as well, because they're going to learn a lot from you. And want to mention anything else before we wrap up here today?
Well, let me cover one other aspect of the coaching program that we have, because we spent such a lot of time today really talking about, raising capital and, of course, what we offer. We run a parallel coaching program alongside that called Build Your Beast, where really it's more of a mindset. It's really a program designed for people that want to aspire to a higher level of success. And what I've largely found working with entrepreneurs and working with people is they get to a point where they feel they've plateaued or maybe they feel stuck. And that's largely because we internally have lost our drive. We've lost our desire. We've lost our mojo, whatever word you want to attach to it. And usually it takes an external force to help somebody kind of flip that switch. And the way that I explain this when I'm speaking on stage is I'll ask, a large audience of people, how many of you here feel that there is another gear inside you that you could be operating at that just ain't been activated? In other words, when you show up to work, you could be putting in more. When you're doing this, you could be doing it with greater intensity. And invariably, everybody's hand, goes up. And I believe largely the reason that everybody's hand goes up is we as humans are basically designed to default to a place of comfort. When most of our comforts are met, i.e. a roof over our head with a nice home and a car that we can drive, and the ability to pay for nice meals and put food on the table. We've lost the hustle because we no longer have to go out every day and hunt. And there's a term that we use to describe this called prey drive. And what I have found basically is that if you look at like dogs, or you look at large cats like lions, tigers, they have this innate ability where they chase. They see something and boom, they chase it. Well, think of your goals the same way. If your goals are what you're chasing, most people aren't chasing their goals. I mean, 87% of our population don't even have goals written down on paper, which is a very important step. But once you understand that you can look to your future and see a bigger, greater potential, and then focus on that and activate what I call that prey drive, it's then just a matter of blocking out the naysayers and not listening to your inner fears and just putting one foot in front of the other every day until those dreams or those goals become reality. And that's largely what I've seen in many, many people, is kind of this transformation and this understanding once they buy into this concept that we've trademarked, which is called beliefology. And the art of beliefology is a trademark concept that simply says, if you change your beliefs, you can change your life. Because the reality of our life is largely defined by our belief system, and many of our beliefs are not true. They're put there by people that loved us in our childhood or as we were growing up, saying, well, don't do this. There's risk to that. And so over time, as you've heard those things multiple times, you don't do them. And so a lot of people, for example, that, have a corporate job with a 401k and paid insurance would never think about quitting that and starting a business, because they've heard all their life and all their career, their safety and security in working for a big company. True, but if you look at corporate America, many people that have corporate jobs are dead broke. They don't save, and they make $60,000, $80,000 a year, but they haven't accumulated wealth. And so I tell people, you're going to get to a point later in life where you don't want to have regret. I talk to many people that are in their 60s that look back on life and say, I have regrets that I didn't do something bigger with my life. I coulda, I shoulda, but I never did. And I tell people, when you get into your late 60s or 70s, do you want to get to a point where you're sitting there going, man, I guess this is all there is for me? Or do you want to take that little bit of risk and really do something that could change things dramatically, not just for you, but create generational wealth? And that's largely what we find as we talk to students, is they want that, they just don't know how to get that. And so that's a lot of what we coach on in our other program that we focus on, called Build Your Beast.
We got a few minutes here left. Let me go over one point here. As you mentioned, even 60s or 70s, would you say there's an age limit, or is there no age limit to how people change their lives?
There's really no age limit. I've seen people in their 60s and 70s do dramatic things. One of my very good friends, a gentleman by the name of Greg Paul, who has summited Mount Everest, and he's the only person that ever reached the summit with 2 artificial knees. He climbed to the summit of Mount Everest at the age of 62 with 2 artificial knees, and he made it on his 5th attempt. In other words, it took him 5 times up and down the mountain over 5 separate years. And one of the years he was there was 2014, when they experienced the worst avalanche in the history of Mount Everest, and it killed 16 people. And he was only 1,000 yards away from this huge avalanche coming down the mountain. And he saw all the snow and he saw all the tents and everything just get taken away. And I said, Greg, I mean, with you sitting there literally 1,000 yards from where that happened, realizing that could have been you, what in the world were you thinking to go back there the following year and try to do it again, knowing you could have been killed? He said it was a goal. He said, I wanted to prove to my grandchildren that once they have a goal, they never have to give up. And I largely proved to them and the rest of the world, and of course to myself, that even at the age of 62 with 2 artificial knees, there is the will and desire, you can make it to the top of the world. And he's just one of the many stories that I love to show that there really is no age. You look at people like Jack LaLanne, Jack LaLanne was in his 80s and he's, a fitness guru. And he's doing things that most people in their 60s cannot even fathom, swimming the English Channel, but doing it, pulling a rowboat behind him, holding the rope in his teeth, and just, feats of strength. So I tell people, where there's desire and where there's a will, it really doesn't matter on the age. Doesn't matter in your 40s, whether you're in your 60s. I believe that somebody can always be doing bigger things with their life.
What about how young? Is there a too early age?
Not really. I see kids that are in their teens that are starting businesses and having massive success. Age really should never be a barrier. I mean, I love one of the episodes of Shark Tank where we have, little kids in their teens and they started businesses and they're getting deals with sharks. I mean, imagine, 18-year-old that has a little side hustle business, and all of a sudden now you're doing business with someone like Mark Cuban or Damon John, just because you have that drive and you have that determination. So really, age is really not a barrier. It really comes down to confidence and how you project and how you articulate and largely how you carry yourself. That is largely going to determine your success in life. I mean, it gets down to one of my favorite lines that Zig Ziglar always used to say, and his line was, "Your attitude determines your altitude." And if you remember that, that's largely what a lot of life is based on. It's your attitude and how you think about certain things. You can look at failure as failure, or you can look at failure the way a lot of successful people do, and that is simply learn from it and realize that failure is good because you now have just learned another way that doesn't work. And so the next day you go out and you try something new that hopefully will. And so it's just largely how you look at certain things in your life that are setbacks that are going to hopefully allow you to grow.
Brad, I want to thank you for the time you spent with us today. I am so impressed. And I want you to repeat again how people can reach you. And I'm going to print that out at the end of this so they have
absolutely. The website that you would want to go to is just my name, www.bradblazar. It's spelled BRADBLAZ like zebra, AR. And you'll see information there on my books. I've got, of course, the 2 books that you can find on Amazon. The very first book, called On the Wings of Eagles, Learn to Soar, was rated as a #1 top-rated read for young entrepreneurs and for business owners by a major literary blog. And really what that book is, it's a compilation of stories taken from some of the most famous people that I've either heard speak or that I've worked with or been around, people like Kevin O'Leary, people like George W. Bush, people like Joe Namath, Rudy Rudiger, Irving Magic Johnson. And so you're not only learning from me, you're sharing some of the stories and insights from some of these great thought leaders. And then, of course, my podcast, if you like listening to some of these big business podcasts, my business podcast you can find on our website. It's called Beast Nation. And it's the second highest rated show, according to Yahoo Finance and Yahoo News, to help people cope with COVID. And I think it's largely because of the big thought leaders and the big business leaders that we bring onto the show that people just love hearing from. So that's largely how you find me. You can find me on Instagram, Brad Blazar. So, follow me, DM me, and I would love to offer anybody that is one of your listeners a free 30-minute strategy call just to talk about their situation, kind of where they are in life, where they'd like to go, and see if there's any tools or things that we might be able to bring to the table for them to largely help them bridge that gap.
And one other thing, Brad, I'd like to make sure I can invite you back for another show because I am enjoying this so much. Would you mind being a guest star in the future? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for today, and I want to thank our audience for showing up.
Thank you so much, Chantel, for having me. Thank you so much. I'm very humbled.
Thank you. That's a wrap.